Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to understand about the fundamental right. Fundamental rights are given under the part 3rd of Indian Constitution from Article 12 to Article 35. It described as a Magna Carta of India. It inspired from the US Bill of Rights and it promote the political democracy. Originally, we have 7 fundamental rights, but presently we have only 6 fundamental rights because right to property was deleted by 44 Constitution Amendment Act, and now the right to property is a constitutional as well as a legal right because it is given under the Article 300A. Fundamental right which are mentioned in the Indian Constitution can be classified into the 6 main category. First is right to equality, which includes Article 14 to 18. Second is right to freedom, which includes Article 19 to 22. Third is right against exploitation, which includes Article 23 to 24. Fourth is right to freedom of religion, which includes Article 25 to 28. Fifth is cultural and educational right, which includes Article 29 to 30. And sixth is right to constitutional remedies, which includes Article 32. There are some fundamental rights which is only available only to the citizen of our country, which are 15, 16, 19, 29, and 30. But other fundamental rights are available to all the citizen and the foreigners as well. Article 12 talks about the definition of a state. One of the very important thing which we need to remember under the definition of a state, judiciary's administrative part also come. The judicial part of judiciary don't come under the definition of a state, but judiciary's administrative part come under the definition of state. Article 13 talks about the laws inconsistent with the fundamental rights. It talks that no law can violate the fundamental rights. Article 14 talks about the equality before law, which includes 2 main concepts. One is equality before law and equal protection of law. Equality before law is a UK based concept, and equal protection of law is an US based concept. Article 15 talks about the prohibition of discrimination on certain ground. It says that states shall not discriminate against any citizen on the ground of only of the religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. Further, we see that there are some addition under this article by the 91st, 93rd, 1st, and 103rd Constitution Amendment Act, by which they talked about the reservation on the basis of some sections. Article 16 talks about the equality of opportunity in public employment. In that, we see that there should be equality of opportunity in public employment, and no citizen can be discriminated or made ineligible for employment of any office under the state on the ground of only religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, or residence. Here we see descent and place of residence, which are not mentioned under the Article 15. And then further, we also see that Parliament has this power to make residence as a certain type of the employment or appointment in a state, and under which we see some of the judgment as well, which talks about this reservation policy, that we see Mandal Commission, which talks about the OBC reservation, which recommended actually 27% of reservation. Then we see Indra Sahani case under this article that talks about the no reservation in the promotion. And the Article 17 talks about the abolition of untouchability. And it is an absolute right. There is no reasonable restriction which applied under this article. And there are some some fundamental rights which actually available against the private entities as well. And those are Article 15, 17, 23, 24, and 32. And some parts of the Article 19 as well. And Article 18 talks about the abolition of the titles, which says that a state cannot confer any title on the citizen or a foreigner. And then Article 19, which talks about the protection of certain rights regarding the freedom of speech, which says that freedom of speech and expression is there under the Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A, and then Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause B, which talks about every citizen has right to assemble peacefully and without arms. Then further, Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause C, which talks about right to form association or union or cooperative society. And then Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause D, talks about citizen can move freely throughout the country of. But there is a one point which we need to remember, that is that it only talks about the internal travel. When it comes to externally traveling any other part of our country, that terms comes under the Article 21, not Article 19. So this is a very important point which we need to remember, that it's only talk that citizen can move freely throughout the territory of our country. And then the Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause E, which talks that every citizen has right to reside and settle in any part of the territory of country. And then Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause G, which talks that all citizens are given the right to practice any profession or to carry any occupation, trade or business. There are some reasonable restrictions which are available for all the fundamental rights under the Article 19. Then we have Article 20, which talks about protection in respect of the conviction for the offense. There are only three main part of this article. That is, no ex post facto law, means no person shall be convicted of by applying retrospective laws. Second is Article 20, subclause 2, which talks about no double jeopardy, means no person shall be prosecuted and punished for the same offense more than once. And then Article 20, subclause 3, which talks about no self incrimination. Then we have Article 21, which talks about protection of life and personal liberty, under which right to livelihood, right of prisoners for dignified life, right to die with dignity, right to privacy comes under this Article 21. And then we have Article 21A, which talks about right to education, which added by 96 Constitution Amendment. Then we have Article 22, which talks about the protection against arrest and detention, under which we talk about the punitive and preventive detention. Then we have Article 23, which talks about the protection of traffic in human beings and force level. Then Article 24, which talks about the prohibition of employment of children in the factories. It prohibits the employment of children below the age of 14 in the hazardous industry. There is an exception that it does not prohibit their employment in any harmless or innocent work, which we need to remember. And then we have Article 25, which talk about freedom of concise and free profession, practice and propagation of religion. Article 26, which talks about the freedom to manage religious affair. Article 27, which talk about freedom as the payment of taxes for promotion of any particular religion. Then Article 28, which talk about freedom as to attendance at religious instruction or religious worship in certain educational institution. Then we have Article 29, which talk about protection of interest of minorities, which talks about two kind of minority, religious and linguistic minority. There are six religious minorities. And then we have Article 30, which talks about right to monitor and establish and administer educational institute. And then we have very important fundamental right, which actually give the power to all the fundamental right. That is Article 32. That is right to constitutional remedies. It is described as in the very soul of Indian Constitution and very heart of it. It recognized as a basic feature by Supreme Court. It means that this Article 32 cannot be taken away by Constitutional Amendment Act, and under which there are 5 writs which we taken by English law. And these 5 writs are habeas corpus, mandamus, certiorari, prohibition, and quo warranto. Then we have Article 33, which talks about power of Parliament to modify the rights conferred by this part in their application to the forces. Then Article 34, which talk about the restriction on the rights conferred by this part while martial law is enforced. And then we have Article 35, which talks about legislation to give effect to provision of Part 3rd of the Constitution, which gives Parliament power to make law to give effect to certain fundamental right. For example, under the Article 16, residence as a criteria for the public employment. Under the Article 32, to empower courts other than Supreme Court and High Court to issue writ, orders, discretion for the enforcement of fundamental right. So that was all about the fundamental rights. Thank you so much.